Outside of getting a proper signal from your OEM source to your aftermarket audio system, the next most important part I feel is getting a proper power and ground for your aftermarket amplifier. So here at Davidson Audio, we have taken the time to make a complete single amp power and ground kit with an upgraded ground for the 2020 to 2024 Indian Challenger and Pursuits. There are a lot of power and ground kits when it comes to aftermarket audio on the market. You got everything from the cheap Amazon kits to the super expensive ones on the market. They're all over the place. What I wanted to provide to the Indian motorcycle market was a high quality oxygen-free copper kit that was pre-length, pre-terminated to length, loomed, shrink tubed, with everything that you need to install a single amplifier on these motorcycles. So that's what we have here. I'm going to go through all the contents on here, and then we're going to show you how to install it on the bike. The first and smallest part of the entire kit, which I feel like is something way overlooked, is a 4-gauge upgraded ground for this bike. And a lot of people overlook this and don't think it's very important. But when you're adding extra power draw on a motorcycle, you really want to make sure that you have adequate ground from the battery. So what we did here is this is a 4-gauge ground that we add to the frame of the bike to the battery. So we double up on there roughly 8 to 4 gauge or 8 to 6 gauge-ish ground that they have on the bike now. We do this larger ground to help ensure we have the best ground possible on these bikes. Sticking with the grounds, we have our nice pre-loomed, pre-terminated with a eyelet to go to the battery and a wire ferrule here for the amplifier side. Oxygen-free copper, 8-gauge ground, very high quality wire, pre-loomed right here, split loom, shrink tubed on both ends. This is again going to go from the battery to your amplifier. The part that actually gives your amplifier the power is our 8-gauge power wire here. So here we have our waterproof fuse holder here. This fuse holder utilizes 2 standard size fuses in there. That goes in this with our custom made bracket that bolts right into an OEM location on the bike. Right here you have a pre-terminated to a ring terminal that will go to the battery. This will run all the way up the bike and go through the fairing to your amplifier. And as I was noted that I misspoke on that one, this is braided expanded loom. So it's not split loom, as there's no split in it. You have to expand it and feed it onto here. And then we use adhesive line shrink tubing on here to ensure that the loom does not come off. Then the last thing in the package you're gonna see is this little baggie. You can ignore the 2 red seals and the Allen there. What's most important are these fuses. Like I said, this fuse holder uses dual standard size fuses. What you'll use for this application on a single amp is 2 yellows in parallel. That'll give you 40 amps of protection. And then you have one more bolt in here. This bolt is what you use to bolt your fuse holder into the OEM location, which we will show you here in just a minute. Fast forwarded here to the battery being removed and everything. So the biggest thing is, if you look right here, there will be 2 6mm that hold the radiator guard to the, what I would consider, I guess, the battery cover, whatever you want to call this thing. You'll remove these 2 bolts first. This panel will kick forward, slide out. Then up here at your snorkel, where your intake is, you have 2 6mm up here. You remove that. This entire radiator cover will come off. Then you will see down here at the battery, you'll have this bracket that'll be across here. Take this 1 6mm out, you push it forward, you wiggle a little bit, it'll pop right out. And then 2 10mm or a Phillips will take the terminals off the battery. That'll pop out. Now you're all caught up to where we're at. We did not do the upgraded ground in this video because we already have a video for that. I will drop a link into that. This has been installed. This is the OEM ground. This is my least favorite part of the entire install. This is why I usually make Bill do them, but he's behind the camera right now, so because he's camera shy. So I get to do it this time. So at this point, I like to just push the upgraded ground out of the way. Here's the OEM ground. It'll just kind of hang out here and move your power up as we're gonna slide the battery back in. So battery slid in, you can slide it towards the back. One thing I will, I'm just gonna touch base on now is watch the inserts inside of here, because I've had this one on the power side fall out so many times and get stuck down in this frame. And the crappy part about that is in order to get it out, you gotta take the battery back out, take a screwdriver from the bottom side, flick it out, then put it back in. And when it's happened to you more than once, it's extremely frustrating. I like to start with the ground, because it's the biggest pain in the butt. What we're gonna be doing here is, I like to do this in kind of a order. You're gonna get a new longer screw from us here for your battery, because we got so many terminals on here. I take the aftermarket ground here. I run the screw, the bolt, through this, so normal, so you'll see this. I turn this terminal backwards, so that way when you put them together, it's gonna create a little bit of a sandwich like that. And then I run it through, this is the fun part. You gotta like line it up, push it on there, and then you gotta line up the, and once you get them slightly started, you can take your 10 millimeter and you can start tightening it up. And then you can see here, I got it all started. I'll just take this baby ratchet and 10 millimeter, and I'll just go ahead and snug it on down. And we tighten this to a good German spec, good and tight. And that'll be solidly in there. We're gonna go ahead and install the power now. So from this side, what I do is I take your fuse cover off here. I just set it down, and then I route the power wire up behind the ground, so that way we're away from the metal. And then I just route it right up here. And the cool part about this is the 8 gauge will actually fit right underneath the radiator. So you just take this, drop this screw in here like this and this. And if I can see, and if it was Bill, he'd probably be freaking out because he got a little arky sparky. And you start the screw, and then I like to start it with this Phillips screwdriver. And like I said, the biggest thing I like to do is you can offset that terminal underneath there by taking the 8 gauge wire behind underneath the radiator. And then once you get it finger tight, you transfer over to your trusty 10 millimeter 1/4 inch drive, and again, get it nice and good and tight. And you're gonna take this little boot, wiggle it back on there, and try to cover that up the best you can, just like that. Like I said, I can't see anything where I'm at, so we'll make sure to go back over that. Push your battery back. At this point, we're gonna install our fuse holder bracket here. So all you gotta do is just pop the cover off. Now, I forgot to mention in the original video, there is no fuse in these. So you put that in after all this is ran and it is terminated at the amplifier. So do not put these in until everything is all hooked up and you're ready to play music. Take that off, take this cap, set it right in here. There is a OEM bolt hole right here. That's tight there. You're gonna route, you're gonna plug this in. And then what I like to do is take this cover, put it back on, take this wire here, route them both underneath here, and then we're gonna route both of our wires up this channel. We're gonna zip tie it all along this harness, and we'll show that to you on the other side.
Real quick before we get this bracket installed, this is the battery hold down bracket, I'm gonna call it, on the Challenger. These are the sides that go towards the metal frame of the clutch side. You push these in there, this comes down, and you use one bolt, and this holds down the battery. This is the OEM part. As you can see, There is the part number for a new one directly from Indian. So what I'm going to show you here is this backside that we're going to modify. So right here I did some crude gray markings here on where we're going to modify this. Essentially what I do is I take my oscillating tool on the backside of this heated insert and I cut down all the way into this plastic. Same thing here, take all of this out all the way across. Same on both sides. And then I went a little heavy here, but I'll take a little bit off this backside, and all that does is it will still hold the battery in just fine. You'll have all this holding it in, but it gives us more area for the larger gauge wires to pass through. So I just wanted to show you that before we go and install this on the bike. So I'm going to modify this now and show you what it looks like when it's done. This is what this will look like once it's all modified. From the front you can't tell any different, but from the back, like I said, that gives us a little bit more room to pass the larger gauge wires through, and this by no means makes it any weaker or less as it was designed. It holds battery in just fine, just allowing a little bit more wire or space here for the wires. My bike and Bill's bike and many customers' bikes are done this way, and we've had zero issues so far. So now let's get this installed with the rest of the wiring.
Before we route this wire, let's go ahead and get this battery cover back on. As I said, you just simply take it, push it back in here, go underneath that ground, and then you're going to take the OEM bolt, which this is a 6mm, and you're just going to go ahead and I'll get my hands on one. So that is all tightened up. That is back on there. All of our wiring is where it needs to be. At this point, we're going to take our harness and route it up. Here's your radiator and the subframe. You're going to route it right up here and right along this wiring harness that's right here. You're going to see a bundle of wiring harnesses all the way up. On the other side, you'll see this harness transitions to the back side of the radiator. So, but also what I want to point out is if you see my finger here and here, these two spots, there's casting tabs that come out. You want to be towards the rear of these two. So you're going to be on this back side here. What I like to do is take this harness, even it up, and then you can route it right up here. Extremely easy, especially with the 4 gauge. And then I take it and go right on top of the harness, which I will get a better view of once we're on the other side. I just like to route it up here to hold it. I want to make sure that I clarify myself here. I guess I had said 4 gauge, I meant 8 gauge, not 4 gauge. This is a single amp kit, which is all 8 gauge wire. So with this held down, what I'm going to do is take a larger zip tie, and I like to bend it in 2 places. It essentially creates like this U and makes it easier to get it behind all these harnesses, and then you can bring it back on itself here. You want to start from the bottom up, so I'll just take the zip tie loosely, slide it down until I get past that first casting tab, and then down towards where Indian has their first zip tie here. Again, you want to even up your power and ground down here. Make sure everything where it needs to be. And send that first zip tie. Get it nice and tight. And then what I'll even do further down here, I'll take a small zip tie and just run one down here to keep this power and ground together down here. Make sure as you go, you're using a good pair of flush cutters. The last thing you want to do is leave a little bit of a zip tie spur and cut yourself later. And we'll do at least 2 more zip ties up here for a total of 3 at a minimum. The biggest thing I want to talk about here while we're here is there's this connector here. You really can't see it. You'll see it on the back side. You do not want to zip tie over this. You want to go underneath between this connector and the harness itself. That concludes everything down here. We're gonna go to the back side, get everything else zip tied up, and get it into the fairing. We're gonna continue zip tying along this main harness right here. We're gonna do at least 2 more zip ties here, and then we're gonna bring it around here and go into the fairing that way. You're gonna wanna do this harness right here. You can pull it out of this clip for a second to get you a little bit easier time to zip tie, because I like to zip tie before and after it. So I'll start the zip tie here, I'll push it back up into this clip, and then bring our wiring harness up along this, tighten it up good. We'll get another one. You can start your zip ties up here and bring them back down. Just make sure you put your wires in it first, because nothing sucks more than getting your zip ties done and then realizing your wires aren't even in it. We're gonna do 3 on here total. Again, nice little flush cutters, snip, snip. I'll throw a zip tie rod on here just to hold that harness right in there. You gotta kinda go from the back side around the front and kinda just stick it on in there. And even if you have a stage 1 intake, I'm fairly certain there's still something there, because on mine we tied it off as well and it held just fine. Here, I like to take, this is kind of not 100% needed, but I'll take the wires and bend it down like this, because what we're gonna do on the 8 gauge, you can get away with little zip ties. 4 gauge, you gotta use a little bit of both. We're gonna take our zip ties and we're gonna start one around both wires, and then you're gonna split them. You're gonna take another one in between the 2 of them. And then what this does is I'll train it to like right about here. It's gonna be hard to see, but you'll see it when it's done. You're gonna do that right there. I don't know if you can see that. So what this does is it helps keep the wires together and on top of each other. I'm gonna do this about 3 times. I just take my hand like this to space them. That way we get this to lay nice and flat up against the frame. We'll zip tie it up to these 2 lines and into the fairing. At this point, you're gonna take our wire just like this. I like to personally go underneath these 2 lines and up into the fairing, seeing that these don't really move. They don't turn or anything. so it's not going to cause any chafing on the bike. I go underneath them, and then apologies for the view, but gonna go ahead and pull them all the way through. And at this right here, right about where they come down, I'm gonna throw one more zip tie. See if this is gonna be, yeah, one of the smaller zip ties will work. We'll probably do with the smaller ones. I'll do 2 of the smaller ones to keep it nice and tight. Make sure it lasts the test of time. Make sure again, you nip off the ends of your zip ties, and we'll go around to the front and show you how it looks from the front. As you see right here, we are through the neck of the bike. Power and ground come out right here, and as you see in our follow-up video to this, the single amp install, you would route this through and land it at your amplifier. Your black will go to the ground, and your red will go to the 12-volt DC.
That is going to wrap up the install process for our 2020 to 2024 Indian Challenger and Pursuit single amp power and ground. I want to emphasize the single amp power and ground part because we do offer a dual amp power and ground for these bikes, but I wanted to make sure, I want to do our videos per product to answer any specific questions you may have by the products and not by our packages. So again, this kit is going to provide you with an upgraded 4-gauge OFC ground to go from your battery to the frame, and then it's going to have a 8-gauge power and ground, again, OFC wire, pre-loomed, terminated, measured, everything, to go from the battery to the fuse holder, because there's a fuse holder for the power, all the way up here into the fairing, giving you enough wire to land to your aftermarket amplifier. And this is going to provide you the correct wire size and gauge for the amplifiers that you're going to run in the fairing of this. And we have taken the time, many revisions, many times, to give you the proper length, sizing, the whole 9 yards, to make it as simple as possible for you all, the consumer, to install this yourself. I could really kind of go on with about all the quality of the stuff that we do, but you all already know that. So I'm just going to wrap this up. If you're looking to do an aftermarket audio system on your Indian Challenger or Pursuit, make sure you give us a call or check out our website, because we have taken a lot of time in all of our products to make it easier for you all, the consumer, to do this yourself. Or if you just don't want to do it, bring it on down here. We would love to take care of you. Or if we have an installer close to you, we'll get you set up there. So again, I am Brandon with Davidson Audio, located here in beautiful Panama City, Florida.